Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. When Dana White chose a name for her business, she decided she wanted a name that had meaning, both for her and for the women she hoped to reach. When Laura Zander picked a name for her business, she thought she was going to be selling coffee. And when Jay Goltz chose a name for his business, he very strategically chose the perfect name to rank well in, wait for it, the Yellow Pages. This week, Dana, Laura, and Jay talk about what they consider the most important decisions they made in building their businesses, including why Dana closed her most profitable location, why it took Laura 15 years to find an operations person, and what Jay figured out about employees who struggle to grow with the business. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which highlights the most important news of the day for business owners and which you can subscribe to at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Jay Goltz, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. Dana White, who is CEO of Paralee Boyd, a chain of hair salons based in Detroit. And Laura Zander, who is CEO of Jimmy Bean's Wool, a digital yarn store that used to sell coffee and is based in Reno, Nevada. The episode is titled, Does It Matter What You Name Your Business? Welcome, Jay, Dana, and Laura. Great to have you here. In last week's conversation with Karen, Paul, and William, I did something a little different. I asked them to take a step back and talk about how they got their businesses off the ground and specifically what they think were the three most important decisions they made in building their businesses. I thought it turned into a really good conversation that took us through some surprising and interesting experiences. And well, I guess I kind of thought if they can do it, I think you guys can probably do it too. So Dana, why don't we start with you? Are there three decisions you made that you think helped you get to this point?
Yes. First decision was an early decision I made before I even opened, and that was to be open 7 days a week. That's a huge contributing factor to me being where I am.
Why was it so important?
It was courageous because nobody else was doing it. Most hair salons operated Wednesday through Saturday. So to say, no, we're open, Sunday and Monday and Tuesday as well, just kind of already made us different in the marketplace. I felt like I set myself up stronger because Sunday and Monday wound up being our busiest days, two of our busiest days. And so that really kind of let me see what this business could do. I think the second thing I did was close my Southfield location, which I did during COVID. That was huge. And I'm glad I did it. It allowed me to reset, which put me on the path towards franchising. It changed my view from local to national to international, even though that was always the vision. That might be the pie in the sky, but your head might be down on the ground working. It forced me to look up and look out and see what's going on.
That's kind of counterintuitive, Dana, in the sense that you're saying being forced by COVID to close a location and cut back, it opened your eyes to going national and thinking bigger.
It wasn't the best cohesive relationship with the landlord. The location no longer fit the brand. And I just didn't love it. I dreaded going there. I was getting caught up in the local of that salon and what was happening in that space. I didn't have the confidence, nor did it help give me the confidence to grow because there were so many issues in that space. When you remove that, a huge weight came off my shoulder and I could look at the newer space that I had, even though that wasn't the most popular space. The most popular space was the Southfield location. So it was a big decision to let it go, but it allowed me to stop getting so caught up in the day-to-day of that location and focus on one location and then look at, okay, the vision, be more committed to the vision because I'm not caught up in the in the day to day of this, very almost overbearing one location. Even though it was making the most money, it was still like, gee whiz, more problems. I mean, it was just a lot of stuff that I just got tired of dealing with. So you have to take a step back so you can launch forward.
You said it made the most money, but was it the most profitable, or it was just the most top line?
It was the most profitable.
It was the most profitable on the books, but maybe not in terms of time, it sounds like.
It wasn't the most profitable as forms of mental health. It was when I tell you, it was draining. Because you didn't know what somebody was going to come in the door and do. I've had people who say they represent the landlord just literally come in the middle of the day and say, you need to move because my cousin wants to open a salon here and the owner knows my cousin and they're not going to let you stay here. Just little stuff like that you keep dealing with that over time. I had customers who would come to my salon in Southfield at 5:00 in the afternoon after they got off of work, and they're parking at the door saying, I've got a guy telling me I've got to pay him $20 to park in this spot. And then I have to go out there and say, why are you charging people? Well, your people shouldn't be parking here. Well, it's a strip mall, right? The club's not open yet. You can't cone these spaces off. You've got to park here. So you got to let her park here. So it was these little things. And when you try to bring it to the landlord, he was very hands off. He didn't want to be bothered. When you try to bring it to the manager, he was very bent on reminding me that I was a woman and there was only so much he was going to do. And there were just certain things I had to accept. I'm a woman. He kept saying that over and over and over. You're getting ahead of yourself, little lady. And it was like, okay, enough. Then structurally, the building wasn't sound.
Again, it sounds counterintuitive to close your most profitable location, but I think you've got us convinced that you probably had good reason to get out of there.
I had good reason. And what wasn't counterintuitive to me, Lauren, was I know several people who have taken a step to the side or taking one step back, 5 steps forward. So that's how I looked at it. I said, you know what? Am I going to lose the Southfield, the busiest location? Sure. But I just feel like it would just be extra weight. And I really felt that it was taking away from me focusing and working towards the vision.
She kept saying that it didn't fit her vision. I think it was more of a business model. I think you figured out that your business model was a certain amount of things and that location no longer fit the ideal business model. And that's why you just said it very well. 1 step backwards, 4 steps ahead, or 5 steps ahead. I had a store I opened early on that was in the wrong location. And it took me many years to figure out, no matter what I did, you can't make up for the wrong location.
The third thing is hiring my operations manager. It literally is my Staples button. It's handled. And that has helped give me the confidence to make decisions as a business owner, and reminded me that I'm actually a good one. Despite, what, some people may think, oh, you just should do more for this or do less for this. I think nobody knows my business like me. And I spent a lot of time asking and bringing, well, what do you think I should do? Well, let me get your opinion, and weighing all of these options, but none of those options were in my business. It was just what people think who had no experience, no time in or anything. So working with someone who makes swift but intelligent decisions, who stays clear on my vision and what I want to do, has instilled a level of confidence in me that says, you know what, you can do this, right? You just need that, not that partner, but that somebody who is practiced in doing this. She's also been really great of managing my expectations for the industry. I'm not from this industry. I am not a hairstylist. So having somebody who works with me, who's been in this industry for years, who can say, yep, this is this, Dana, but this. And she's one of the main reasons why I chose to franchise. Of course, there's been several, but having that really honest and open conversation with somebody who is working with me, who has the years of experience, who is straight, no chaser. She doesn't tell me things because it will make me feel good. That would be the third thing. My business changed dramatically. And even the fourth thing, raising my prices. Thank you, Jay Goltz. But raising my prices, bringing on that operations manager I wouldn't be where I am today had I not done the number 3 and number 4.
Can I just throw out there, Lauren, did you notice that numbers 2, 3, and 4 all happened as a result of this podcast?
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you for that observation, Laura, because that is so true. Because of this podcast, again, that confidence that says, hey, talk about it, do it. And then unfortunately, the guests don't get to hear what we talk about with each other outside of the podcast, which is also huge.
Yeah.
Jay is my mentor.
Wait a second. I made a rule a long time ago. You guys aren't allowed to talk to each other except on the podcast. Don't tell me you're breaking that rule.
Broken. Nobody puts foot to ass like Jay. And it's the best thing ever. It is like, you need it. You need somebody to say, when I had that episode where I had the FUD, Jay got on me. Jay was like, oh, you're not ready. You're dealing with this with one location. If this is how you responded to one, you're not going to be able to handle 50. But like he went in and I got off that phone call like, you know what? S on my chest, cape on, like go handle your business. So
that's what we're talking about. There's no whining in entrepreneurship.
No whining. There's no crying in entrepreneurship.
Oh, bullshit. I cry and whine all the time.
All right, let's go to Laura. How about you? What were your 3 key decisions?
My first key decision, and you're going to groan, but was marrying Doug. And I told you.
Yeah.
Wait, he's your co-founder. I'm not groaning.
And he's not even listening to this. So what are you getting out of kissing up to him, really?
Maybe his parents are listening.
Right.
So, from a business standpoint, it so happens that, yes, he's my co-founder and he has done all the technical side. But I think the replicable action is picking a partner in business. If you need a partner, having a partner that you work really well with. And he and I met at work. We've always worked together. And yeah, it's just, we would not be where we are without either one of us. I always think, I'm replaceable, but he's not.
That's an interesting point, Laura. I tend to think of it as, kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. Not only are you putting your marriage at risk, you're putting your business at risk when you bring all this together. But I didn't realize you guys had worked together previously and had that experience. I knew you were both developers, but I didn't know you did it together.
Yeah, we met at work, and then once we ended up having jobs at different companies, we actually started doing some contracts on the side at night together. So, yeah, we've just always worked. And it's always like, usually what happens is I'll do 95%, maybe 90% of like the development and stuff, and then he has to clean it all up and finish it. So I have always been really good at like selling projects and, telling people, hey, we could do this for you. And then he has to actually do all the work. And it's just worked out really, really well. So, and it gives us something to talk about. Jay, what do you and your wife talk about at night?
You.
No, you already told me that's not
true. We talk about the children. We don't talk about the business. I just, and I think you bring up a very valid point, but I'm going to give the opposite thing of that I've just learned that whatever I say can and will be used against me. So there's no point in talking about the business. Oh, I hired a new manager. It's going to get easier. And then a month later, I thought you hired a new manager. It was going to get easier. So I've just learned it's worked out extremely well this way for the last 30 years. She does her thing and I do my thing, and I don't talk about business to her. There's really no upside to it. And I'm not saying that's right for everybody. It works extremely well for me.
So that's number 1, and then you're going to groan again. But number 2, and just to hear me out, was going to a big conference, and it was the Ernst & Young Strategic Growth Forum, and deciding to put myself out there and walking up to Lauren Feldman and meeting him.
Groan.
I'm not groaning. That's a legitimate
thing.
No,
that's on my list too.
And walking up to him and completely showering him with, or scaring or intimidating or whatever.
Ambush.
Ambushing him with details of every blog, I think, that had been written under his tenure and the You're the Boss, New York Times blog. And then forcing him to go have a drink with me later and pitching him the idea that maybe I could be a blogger, and then continually emailing him and continually like trying to develop this friendship what was that, 8 years ago? It was 10 years ago. It was 2011.
Wait, is that before or after he had the restraining order on you?
Before.
It was, yeah, exactly. But that, that led to, meeting Jay, having Jay as a mentor, meeting all these different people, being a blogger.
Dana, oh my God.
I mean, just all of the different people I've met, all of the deals that I've put together. I mean, we've acquired 3 companies in the last few years, and none of those things would have happened. So that was number 2. And I think, again, the replicable kind of action there is putting myself out there, and people talk about networking, and I hate the whole networking thing, but actually going and connecting and meeting people that you genuinely, authentically appreciate and can learn something from. And, out of the thousands of people that go to these conferences, there are only 1 or 2 people that I still talk to, but finding, it takes some work to find those 1 or 2 people.
I remember that conference well. I had a great time there. I met you and a bunch of other great people, and I kept going back, but I don't think I've ever seen you there again. Why didn't you go back?
Because I found you. I don't need to go back. I don't need another. No, you know what? So I went a couple of times, and I actually didn't go back because it actually kind of blew my mind a little too much. It was like going to a buffet, and you meet all of these amazing people and you hear all of these amazing ideas. And it was more than I could execute, and it was more than I could implement. And then I would go, and I'm looking at all of these amazing women who have built these incredible companies that are infinitely more successful. And it really kind of destroyed my confidence. And I just started to compare myself to other people too much. So I just took a break.
I thought that was a thing men did.
Oh, really?
No, women do it too. Big time.
Oh, I didn't know that men did that.
Jay?
Well, here's where the age difference comes in. When I was in my 40s, that's what I did. I kept thinking, oh my God, you thought you were such hot stuff. Look at, you're nothing. I read Forbes. There's a guy your age that's worth $300 million or $5 billion. And then I hit 50 and I figured it out. And what I figured out is, yeah, there's always going to be someone who does better. The fact you're 1 out of 10,000. Do you really need to be 1 out of 1 million? I don't think so. And besides which, at the end of the day, do you not have everything you want? I'm all chilled out now. I'm totally done with that stuff.
Yeah. And this is, I was in my late 30s at the time as well. So it was, exacerbated even more. But okay, so that was number 2, is like going to those. And then number 3 is I'm going to kind of piggyback off of Dana. And it was finding my number 2, and finding that operations, that general manager. So, for those of you guys who haven't read the book Traction, or any of the EOS stuff, there are a couple of really good books. I think Rocket Fuel is another one that really describe this kind of dynamic between the quote unquote visionary and then the number 2, the person who gets things done, can manage the people, and understands, the way that you discuss things, understands what you're thinking, and can translate that to the rest of the organization. So everything really changed once I found that person.
When did you find that person?
Almost 5 years ago.
How many years were you into your business at that point?
15.
Yeah, I picked mine up year 7, year 8.
Okay. I didn't know I was looking. Well, that's not true. I had 2 other people that, I had as the general manager, and it wasn't working, but I assumed it was my fault. I kept thinking it was my fault. I'm not communicating well. So, I went through all of these things to try to, fix myself. And then, after they finally didn't work out and I find the person that does work, I'm like, oh, I'm sure there are things that I could have done better. I know there are things I could have done better.
Well, the irony here is it was your fault and that you probably hired the wrong people, as
Totally.
I did 10 times. Literally, I literally went through 10 people over a 3-year period because I didn't understand how to hire a production manager, and I was younger than all of them, and I assumed, oh, this person's in their 50s. They certainly know how to run a factory. And then I sent them off there, and I realized I was hiring the wrong people. Then I hired the right person, and it's 24 years later, and he's still with me. So it always, in my world, it comes down to hiring.
So what are your 3 decisions, Jay?
Well, mine are categories of which I've repeated several times. The first one was, no pun intended to Laura, the phrase stick to the knitting. I didn't. I thought I could expand, and I took framing, and I thought, well, it's home furnishings. I think I could sell some furniture or some accessories here, and I went ahead and I expanded into other related businesses. I didn't just stick to picture framing, so I did it with home furnishings.
Did you feel like you were taking a big risk doing that?
That's my gift and my curse. I never think I'm taking a risk. I think I can do anything, and then I find out, yikes, you don't know what you're doing.
Did you know what you were doing when you went into furnishings?
Absolutely not. I opened up a home and garden store. I opened up a whole garden store. I don't know anything about it. And when I say I don't know anything about it, I really mean I don't know anything about it. But what I've also learned about myself is I figure stuff out. And if nothing else, I find the right people to run it. And that's what I've done. So it's worked. I'm not recommending this for everybody, but it worked. I jump into stuff I don't know anything about, and I did figure it out. It certainly was not efficient, and I'm not saying that's great for everybody, but it did work. So that was the first thing. I did expand from the narrow vertical I was in of just custom picture framing. The second thing was, and I didn't do this till I was 43, I bought a building. And then I bought 3 more over the next 20 years. And it is absolutely proven to be a key element to my business, that I don't have to worry about as you just heard Dana talking about her landlord, I don't have to deal with my landlord. So buying buildings, has worked out extremely well for me. And I think there are many, many entrepreneurs that don't think about it, it would be a good idea to buy the building they're in. So that was huge. I mean, maybe you could even call that the linchpin to the whole business, is that I own the properties now. And lastly, this one's a little tricky, but I believe this is a common thing. You have to remember, I started out of the trunk of my car, and I've got 130 employees. That was not a smooth, straight line. And what I figured out is I have had 3 key realignments, I'll call it. If you don't know what that means, I fired my quote-unquote right-hand guy. And when you say you hired your right-hand person or number 2, I would caution you and everyone else. I don't know that I would call that a number 2. I would call that a key employee, because what I've experienced is I've got 5 key employees. I don't have a number 2. I think having a number 2 or a right-hand person is a bad trap for a growing business, because when I hired that person, when I had 10 employees, and they were the one that was there early and there late and smarter than everyone else and responsible, and I made the mistake of making them vice president, I had no idea what I was doing with that. And then 5 years later, when you grow some more, that person's way over their head and can't handle the job. So it's a romantic story to talk about, oh, I've got the same people that I started with. I do have some of them. I absolutely have some people that have been with me for 40 years. But that same person you hire when you've got 15 people, that turns into the key person, the one person, when you've got 50 people, it frequently doesn't work, and it's ugly. And I've been through it 3 times, and every time I went through this, the company soared as soon as that person left. And the first time it was quite upsetting to the whole system and to me personally. But after that, I kind of understand it now. And there's times where you have to make the tough decision that what might have worked earlier on doesn't work anymore, or maybe it never worked right and you didn't get it.
In those 3 situations, how long did you live with it, knowing that you probably should do something, but couldn't quite get yourself to do it?
In hindsight, that's easy to say. At the time, did I let it go on too long? Absolutely. And you know, I've been in lots of business groups over the years. I don't think I've ever met an entrepreneur that didn't tell me that he or she didn't wait too long to fire someone that wasn't working, it wasn't the right fit. These aren't necessarily bad people. These aren't necessarily people that are they can't do the job properly. And you've tried and you've coached them, but they're the wrong person for the job. And maybe it's because the job has changed, but in every one of these cases, it went on too long. And in every one of these cases, especially one in particular, you find out things about an hour after they left that you think, oh my God, I had no idea this was going on. And when you get bigger, it gets way easier for that to happen. I got rid of someone someone finally revealed to me what was going on, and it was really bad.
What kind of stuff?
come to my house and help getting employees to do personal stuff for her. Well, here's what happened. This looks will pay it off. I had an employee come back that had been gone for a couple of years, and she goes, "Oh, I heard so-and-so is gone." I go, "Yeah." I said, "I'm really sorry about what was going on." She goes, "Oh, yeah, you know what that person used to do to me?" And she would tell me these stories, which I had no idea was going on. And I said, "You know what? I'm really sorry that happened. I just didn't know what was going on. I wish somebody would have said something." She walks out. It was on the second floor. She goes downstairs. She walks back up the stairs 2 minutes later, and she looks me in the eye and she goes, "Jay, I'm really sorry I didn't say something." And I said, "You know what? Thank you. I'm not putting it on her to tell me, but I appreciated the fact she thought about it. And maybe I'm just not a great man. I'll take full responsibility for this. Again, should have never put this person in that position and was way over their head. And I would say in all three of these people, they were way over their head. I should have never put them in that position, but I didn't know what I was doing. I'm the first to admit I'd never worked in another company. I've never had any management training. I've never been trained by anybody. I've never been coached by anybody. I've never been mentored. I found people who were really good at something, were loyal, were working hard, and I thought, oh, gee, I should put them in charge. That doesn't mean that they've got the skill set to be in charge. And just to be clear, the last one of these was 25 years ago. It took me 20 years to figure this out, but I haven't had one of these in over 20 years because I finally figured out what being the manager is, which is I'm really careful before I promote someone into a position. I make sure that they really know what they're doing.
So I want to ask all three of you about something. It's a decision that a lot of people obsess over that I thought one of you might mention and none of you did. That's the decision of what to call your business. Dana, let me ask you. You obviously picked the name of your company for a very personal reason. Looking back at that, did you make the right call?
I think so, but I have second-guessed it a couple of times.
Tell us where the name comes from.
It's my grandmother's name. It's actually my grandmother's maiden name. People know her as Paralee Warren, but before she was Paralee Warren, she was Paralee Boyd. I chose that name because I wanted to pay homage to who she was and her entrepreneurial drive before she became a wife and mother. And then I also wanted to include the culture by which she had in her home when I knew her as, in the 80s as grandma. One, I chose it because I knew it spoke to the African-American market. Paralee is not a name that people go, well, what's that? It's an old Southern Black name. But I thought I wanted something simpler, something, I was going to name it, just simply Wash, Wrap, and Go, but that's not, I wanted the name of this business to mean something. And even if it doesn't mean something to somebody who hears it initially, I want it to mean something. And also very personally, when my grandmother died, I was 12 years old, a year after my father died. She was only 54 years old. And I remember thinking, 54 is old, but I knew she wasn't old, right? I knew she wasn't 80. And so I just remember feeling that there was so much life of hers not yet lived. And there were so many things that she didn't do. And I wanted not so much for her to live on, but she deserves this platform because she was wonderful and she was mine. And so I'm very driven when I hear women on their phone walking into the salon, getting ready to get their hair done, saying, yeah, I'm walking into Paralee's, or, hey, I'm at Paralee Boyd's, let me call you back. Or where'd you get your hair done? I've asked a woman that because I loved her hair. And she goes, oh, there's this place in Midtown called Paralee Boyd. That warms me. The love of a granddaughter to a grandmother, to love her so much, to build a national brand in honor of her and what she embodied. Yeah. But have I had second thoughts? Sure. But no, it's very personal to me.
You know what? You said something very important. Two things that were very important. One is you said, I think so. Who knows? None of us know for sure what would have happened if we would have named it something else. I mean, you're guessing. So that's a smart answer. And two, you know what? This gives you so much joy. Business, it's your business. You can do what you want. Even if you would have made some more money, you know what? I'm just getting goosebumps hearing how much joy you get.
She and I were very, very close. She and I, they call me her fourth daughter. She had just gotten a job right before she died. She had never worked before. She worked for the city of Highland Park. She had just started driving herself. She had just gotten her license.
Wow.
And then about a year later, she got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and died shortly thereafter. So there was all this life not lived. And you just always wonder, she loved to write. So what would she have done? And we'll never know. But I tell you what, her name will be everywhere.
I love that. Well, let me ask you about that. Dana, you say that you have had second thoughts at times. I'm curious, you kind of had a second chance when you decided to franchise. Did this conversation come up at all with the franchising people? Did they ask about it?
Not at all. Nope. They never, they're so solid. I thought I'm going to have to change my marketing to be more inclusive. I'm going to have to change the name to be more, less of a tongue twister for some people. Not at all. They were very clear from day one when I worked with the strategic implementation person. One, this is an African-American salon for African-American women named Para Lee Boyd. You learn Starbucks, you can learn Para Lee.
All right, Laura, Jimmy Bean's Wool.
Yeah. Well, now my story's not going to be nearly as good as Dana's is.
We're not comparing. It's not a competition.
Everything's a competition.
No, it's not.
This whole conversation.
We did, didn't we?
Have this conversation.
And I think we concluded you haven't come to terms with that yet. We're still working on that.
Yeah. So when we decided to open this yarn shop 20 years ago,
a brick and mortar neighborhood yarn shop.
A brick and mortar neighborhood yarn shop. I had a mentor at the time who had run a yarn shop. She didn't own it, but she ran like a yarn corner in a shop. And this woman she was in her 50s, so I'm in my 20s at the time. And I really respected, she was no nonsense, so no fluff. Like, I respected everything about her. And so I'm floating names by her, and I'm like, we were on the Truckee River. Do we call it Truckee River Knits? Do we call it, Truckee Yarn Shop? Do we call it the Tahoe Knitting, blah, blah, blah? Or do we call it Jimmy Bean's Wool? And she's like, ooh.
Well, wait, you're going to have to explain, why did that come up?
Yeah. So my husband, Doug has always called me Jimmy, or pretty much since we met. We were listening to a song, an album one time when we were out climbing by this guy named Todd Snyder. And, I grew up in the South, and I've had a couple of trailer houses. I bought one in college, and then I lived in one when I was a kid. And so in this song by Todd Snyder, it was called Double Wide Blues. The coolest guy in the trailer park is named Jimmy because he has a pool. He has a blue plastic pool on his back deck. And so in the song, Todd Snyder's like, yeah, he's cool like Jimmy. This guy, he wears a white t-shirt with a mustard stain, and I'm always kind of a mess. So Doug started calling me, saying that I was cool like Jimmy. And so all of his friends started calling me Jimmy and blah, blah, blah. So that was my nickname. And then at the time, I had also built a website for an espresso cart manufacturer. And so we decided we were opening a yarn shop / coffee shop. And we actually thought the coffee shop is what was going to work. We didn't think the yarn was going to work. So the beans, was a play to the coffee shop part. And then the wool, obviously, because we had yarn. So when I presented, the ideas, I'll never forget standing next to the building that we had chosen. I'm standing right next to the dumpsters with Diane, and I'm like, okay, what do you think? Truckee River Knits, Tahoe Knits, Jimmy Bean's Wool. And she's like, ooh, I like that. And I'm like, really? Because I didn't expect her to like that at all. I thought she was going to just think that was ridiculous. So she's like, I like it. And I'm like, all right, done. And we just went with it. We ran with it.
It's a great story.
It has ended up differentiating us from everybody else because, the other 2,000 yarn shops in the country all have yarn, knitting, a city name.
Or how many stores are there in the United States called the Yarn Shop?
The Yarn Shop,
right.
Or Knit and Pearl and blah, 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 which are all great names. But we were one of the first, e-knitting was our big competitor at the time. It was an e-commerce knitting site. And then yarn.com, was our competitor. And another one, I don't even remember the name. They're out of business now. But anyway, so it ended up really differentiating us. I mean, this was like right at the beginning of like Google search and YouTube and all this kind of stuff, it helped us because we're not competing with anybody else, and it's given us a way to build our brand in a way that other shops have not been able to build their brand. So for us, it was huge. And like to Dana's point as well, in terms of going national or going global, we don't have that kind of localized element, so it's not Detroit hair, right? And it's not Tahoe City, blah, blah, blah. And, you end up with a shop in North Carolina and people are like, what is this whole Tahoe thing? So, and, then you've got the storytelling side of it. So if you have nothing else to talk about, at least you can talk about the genesis of your name.
So, Jay, you went a more functional route.
Well, you talked about Google. None of you, Lauren's old enough to remember this. There was a pre-Google. It was called Yellow Pages. And the key was to have an A name. So Artists Frame Service is an A name. I was selling to artists. That's what I did originally. I went in college. I started going to all the art fairs, literally with samples in my trunk, showing artists the frames. And then when I graduated and I decided to actually do it was called Artist Metal Frame Factory. We're selling metal frames. They were a new invention at the time, the screw together metal frame. And then when I went into the regular framing, my wife suggested call it a service. So we call it Artists Frame Service. I don't know that regularly we get checks written out to Artist Frame Shop, Artist Frame Up, Artist Frame whatever. I don't know that was the smartest name, but it's worked. And should I've called it Goltz Framing? Maybe. I don't know. Who knows? But, and the A thing no longer has any relevance because Google doesn't list things by alphabetical order. So,
do you remember considering other names at the time?
The only other name I thought about, I actually remember being in my college dorm room brainstorming. I thought, maybe I'll call it the Frame Station. And I was at a trade show and this guy comes up and his badge, the name of his store is the Frame Station. So I said, I was thinking of naming that the Frame Station. I was thinking of calling my store that. He goes, be glad you did. And he said, on a weekly basis, I'll call a customer and say, hi, it's Bob from the Frame Station. He goes, you're calling from the train station? He goes, it's an ongoing problem, and I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, well, okay, but I get the Jimmy Dean, like, so you sell sausages? Like sausages
Do you really?
made out of, God.
Jimmy Dean, yeah,
Jimmy Dean, and then Jim Beam. So, like, do we sell?
You should really sue Jimmy Dean for confusion in the market. See if you can get a cease and desist order on that.
Or you should sell sausage. Have you thought about that?
Exactly. If we could sell, like, bourbon-laced sausage for Jim Beam and Jimmy Dean. Yeah. And I'll get people, and I don't know, Dana, if you've had this experience, but people call and they're like, hello, is James there? May I speak with James?
Oh my God.
Yeah,
if one more person calls me, hi, can I please speak to Paralee? I'm sorry, she's deceased. May we take a message? Right? And no. And I've got another one. We've had customers come in. Oh, it's hilarious. We've had customers come in. Paralee told me I could pay with a check. I said, she did?
I get people going into Jason Home and they'll tell the person, I'm friends with Jason and my name is not Jason. So the second they do that, they've been revealed.
But whoa, it's even better. And I said, she did? Because I go right along with it. I said, she did? Yes, she is on the usher board with me at right there at 2nd Ebenezer, and I saw her on Sunday. And she told me I could come in here and get my blow and go.
Me.
Oh, they keep going. My blow and go and my deep, and that I could pay with a check. I said, well, when are you going to see her again? Oh, I'll see her during Wednesday service. I said, could you do me a favor? And she said, anything. And I said, could you let her know that her granddaughter and her 3 daughters would love to talk to her since she's been dead since 1989.
Wait, you're talking to a customer.
A customer.
Do they stay or do they leave after you say that?
The look on their faces. Well, one lady said, are you sure? I said, ma'am, I'm positive. So we've had Paralee sightings buying carrots at Myers, which is a grocery store here in Michigan. We've had Paralee goes to like 3 churches.
Wow.
And it said, Paralee was there. She's so proud of you. I said, I hope so.
Oh, man.
We are out of time. My thanks to Jay Goltz, Dana White, and Laura Zander. As always, thanks for sharing, guys. Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN@21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.